Worthless. You're absolutely worthless. Those words still echo in my mind, even 20 years later. I can still see my father's face, red with rage, as he threw my belongings onto our front lawn. My mother stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her silence more devastating than his shouts. I was 16, and my crime? Getting a B in advanced chemistry while working part-time to save for college. My name is Alexandra Mitchell, and at 36, I'm the CEO of Mitchell Pharmaceuticals, one of the fastest-growing biotech companies in Boston. But that evening 20 years ago, I was just a terrified teenager watching everything I knew crumble around me. If you can't maintain perfect grades, you'll never amount to anything. My father had screamed. We didn't invest in private schools and tutors for you to become mediocre. The rain had started to fall, soaking through my clothes as I gathered what I could into my school backpack. My younger sister Emily watched from her bedroom window, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't dare speak up. In our house, academic perfection wasn't just expected, it was the only acceptable outcome. That night, I slept in my best friend Maria's garage. Her parents would have let me stay in the house, but I was too ashamed to accept more than the minimal help. The next morning, I walked to school early, used the gym showers, and pretended everything was normal. But nothing was normal again. I spent the next 2 years bouncing between friends' houses and a small room I rented with my part-time job earnings. Despite everything, I maintained my grades, graduated valedictorian, and earned a full scholarship to MIT. Not that my parents knew. They blocked my number and told relatives I was away finding myself. Through it all, I kept focusing on one thing, my dream of making a difference in medical research. Every slight, every hardship, every lonely night only fueled my determination. I worked through college, took extra credits, and graduated early with honors in biochemistry. The irony? That B in chemistry that had enraged my father so much became the foundation of my career. The teacher who gave me that grade, Dr. Henderson, became my mentor. She understood that my slight drop in grades came from exhaustion, not laziness. She helped me secure my first internship, wrote my college recommendations, and later became my company's first board member. Now, 20 years later, I stood in my home office, staring at the email that had just arrived. Alexandra, your father and I need to speak with you urgently. We'll be at your house tomorrow at 2 p.m. Mom. No apology, no explanation, just the same commanding tone that had ruled my childhood. They found my address somehow, probably through Emily, who'd recently reached out after becoming a mother herself. I glanced around my office at the awards lining the walls, the framed magazine covers featuring my company's breakthroughs in cancer research. The view from my window overlooked Boston Harbor, a far cry from the garage I'd slept in at 16. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. Dr. Mitchell, your 3 p.m. with the Japanese investors is starting soon. Should I have James bring the presentation files? Yes, thank you, Sarah, I replied, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling my mother's email had left. The next day at exactly 2 p.m., my security system announced visitors at the gate. Through the camera, I saw them, my parents, standing in front of my mansion's entrance. My father's hair had gone completely gray, and my mother looked smaller somehow, less intimidating than in my memories. They were dressed formally, as if attending a business meeting rather than trying to reconnect with their daughter. I watched them for a moment, remembering that rainy night, the weight of my wet backpack, the sound of my father's voice calling me worthless. My finger hovered over the intercom button. 20 years of silence, and now they needed to speak with me urgently. I had a pretty good idea why. Our company's latest breakthrough had been all over the news. Mitchell Pharmaceuticals had just received FDA approval for a revolutionary cancer treatment. Our stock had tripled overnight. The same parents who'd thrown me out for being mediocre were about to find out exactly what their worthless daughter had become. I pressed the intercom button. The walk from my front door to where my parents stood felt like crossing decades. My mother's eyes widened as she took in my appearance, the tailored suit, the confident posture, everything about me screaming success. My father's expression remained carefully neutral, though I noticed his hands fidgeting with his wedding ring, a nervous habit from my childhood. Alexandra, my mother started, her voice softer than I remembered. You look well. Thank you, I replied coolly. Shall we discuss whatever urgent matter brought you here? They followed me into my home office, their footsteps echoing in the marble hallway. I caught my mother staring at a framed Forbes cover featuring me under the headline, Biotech's Rising Star, the woman revolutionizing cancer research. Would you like something to drink? I asked, maintaining the polite distance of a business meeting. Alexandra, my father finally spoke, his voice cracking slightly. We need your help. Of course they did. I gestured for them to sit while I remained standing, a power dynamic they clearly found unsettling. Emily's daughter, your niece, my mother continued, clutching her handbag. She's been diagnosed with leukemia. The news hit me harder than expected. I'd never met my niece. Emily had only recently reached out through social media, sharing pictures of little Sophie. The traditional treatments aren't working, my father added. We've heard, your company's new drug is still in limited release, I finished for him. The waiting list is extensive. But you're the CEO, my mother pressed. Surely you could pull strings? Skip the proper protocols? I interrupted. Like when you threw me out for not being perfect enough? My father flinched. We made mistakes. Mistakes? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You kicked out your 16-year-old daughter for getting a B. You called me worthless. You blocked my number, told relatives I was troubled. Those weren't mistakes. They were choices. We were wrong, my mother whispered, tears forming in her eyes. When we saw you in the news, your company's success, we realized how terribly wrong we were. Ah, I said, sitting down at my desk. So you're proud of me now that I'm successful? Now that I have something you need? The silence that followed was deafening. Through my office window, I could see the harbor, ships moving slowly across the water. Somewhere out there was the garage I'd slept in, the diner where I'd worked double shifts, the library where I'd studied until closing because I had nowhere else to go. Sophie is 6, my father said quietly. She loves science, just like you did at that age. She asks about her Aunt Alex. I opened my laptop, pulled up a file. The treatment protocol requires extensive testing and evaluation. There are no guarantees, and it's not something I can simply arrange with a snap of my fingers. We understand, my mother said quickly. We just thought that I'd forget 20 years of silence because now you need something from me. My father stood up suddenly. We know we don't deserve your help. We know we failed you. But please, don't punish Sophie for our mistakes. His words hung in the air as my assistant Sarah knocked and entered with a stack of files. Dr. Mitchell, the board meeting documents you requested, she said, placing them on my desk. And Dr. Henderson called. She'd like to discuss the pediatric trial expansion. Dr. Henderson, the same teacher who'd given me that fateful B, who believed in me when my own parents hadn't. The universe had a sense of irony. I turned back to my parents. I'll have my team review Sophie's case. Not because you asked, but because every child deserves a chance. I'll need her complete medical records sent to my office. Thank you, my mother breathed, reaching for my hand across the desk. I pulled back before she could touch me. This isn't forgiveness, I said clearly. This is me doing my job, the same job you once called worthless. As they stood to leave, my father paused at the door. We watched every news story about you, he said softly. Kept every article. We were too ashamed to reach out, but we're proud of you, Alexandra. Not because of your success, but because you became someone so much better than us. I waited until they left before letting out a shaky breath. On my desk sat a framed photo from my MIT graduation, just me and Dr. Henderson, both smiling. No parents in sight. Next to it was my first patent certificate, the foundation of my company's success. 20 years ago, they'd thrown me away for being imperfect. Now they were back, not because they'd changed, but because they needed something only I could provide. The irony wasn't lost on me. Their worthless daughter had become their last hope. I picked up my phone to call Dr. Henderson. We had a pediatric trial to discuss, and this time, I would be the one deciding who deserved a second chance. 3 weeks after my parents' visit, I sat in my office reviewing Sophie's medical records. Dr. Henderson stood by the window, analyzing the latest trial results. She's a perfect candidate for the treatment, she said, turning to face me. The genetic markers match exactly what we're looking for. Alexandra, we could help her. I nodded, staring at Sophie's photo paper-clipped to the file. She had my sister Emily's eyes and, according to her psychological evaluation, a passion for science that reminded me painfully of myself at that age. Have you spoken to Emily? Dr. Henderson asked gently. She was one of the few people who knew my full story, who'd witnessed firsthand what I'd gone through. She called yesterday, I admitted. First time in 20 years. She apologized for not standing up for me back then. Said she was too scared to defy our parents. And now? Now she's a mother watching her daughter fight for her life. It changes your perspective, I suppose. The next day, I had Sophie transferred to our research facility. I watched through the observation window as she arrived, a small figure clutching a worn chemistry textbook. My parents hovered anxiously in the background while Emily helped her settle into the hospital bed. Aunt Alex? Sophie's voice was small but curious when I entered the room. Mom says you make medicine that helps people get better. I try to, I replied, surprised by the warmth in my own voice. Is that why you got a B in chemistry? Because you were trying to help people? The room went silent. My parents stiffened and Emily looked mortified. But Sophie just smiled, showing a gap where her front teeth should be. Mom told me about when you were young, she continued. How you worked really hard and still studied lots and lots. I got a C+ on my last science test because I was too tired for my medicine, but I still love science. Something inside me broke and healed simultaneously. I sat on the edge of her bed, opening her textbook. Want to know a secret? Sometimes the best scientists aren't the ones who get perfect grades. They're the ones who never stop asking questions, even when things get hard. Over the next few months, I found myself spending more time in Sophie's room. Between treatments, we did science experiments, talked about chemistry, and drew molecular structures on her whiteboard. She had an intuitive understanding of concepts that amazed even our senior researchers. My parents maintained a respectful distance, speaking only when necessary about Sophie's treatment. But I caught them watching our interactions, saw the regret in their eyes when Sophie would excitedly show them something new I'd taught her. 6 months into the treatment, Sophie's results were promising. The cancer was responding, her numbers improving steadily. One evening, as I was leaving her room after explaining how polymers worked, my father was waiting in the hallway. I watch you with her, he said quietly, teaching her, encouraging her. You're everything we should have been. I'm just treating my patient, I replied, but we both knew it wasn't true. No, he shook his head. You're being the aunt she deserves, the mentor I should have been. Alexandra, we can never undo what we did to you. But seeing you now, seeing how you've used your success to help others, we were so wrong. You weren't worthless. We were. For the first time in 20 years, I saw genuine tears in my father's eyes. A week later, Sophie's latest results showed complete remission. As her family celebrated, I stood back, watching through my office window. Dr. Henderson joined me, placing a hand on my shoulder. You know, she said, sometimes the greatest achievements come from our deepest wounds. That B might have cost you your family, but it gave you the determination to build something extraordinary. And now, it's helped save your niece's life. Sophie was discharged the following day. Before leaving, she handed me a card she'd made, covered in hand-drawn molecular structures and a message. Thank you for showing me that perfect grades don't make perfect scientists. Love, your favorite niece. As I watched them drive away, I realized that while I couldn't forget the past, I could choose how it shaped my future. My parents' cruelty had driven me to succeed, but it was my choice to use that success to help others, to be the mentor and supporter I never had. The next morning, I approved the expansion of our pediatric program, ensuring more children like Sophie would have access to our treatments. On my desk, next to my awards and achievements, I placed Sophie's card, a reminder that sometimes our greatest wounds lead to our greatest healing. Perfect grades hadn't made me successful. Being thrown away hadn't made me worthless. In the end, it was the determination to prove them wrong, to be better than the people who'd hurt me, that had built my empire. And now, that empire was changing lives, one patient at a time. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong, it's proving yourself right.